How's it going, guys? Gleb here, and today I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts about this little guy right here, the Olympus E-M5 Mark II. So this little guy right here, it's a bit of an older camera. It came out in 2016, however it still holds up pretty well even to this day, and I believe they're probably going to be releasing a replacement for it sometime soon, so chances are the prices on these guys are going to be dropping pretty soon. And just real quick, I don't actually own this camera. This belongs to my dad. However, I have used it quite a few times just as either a second camera or, just for fun, because I wanted to see what it feels like to use it and to see if I like it as well. And that was way before I even bought the GH5 or anything like that. And overall, just real quick, I like this little camera. It's pretty fun to use and really nice to carry around. So, the Olympus OMD E-M5 Mark II. That's a long name, so we're just going to stick with E-M5 Mark II, or just the E-M5, whatever. Anyways, so this little guy right here sports a 16 megapixel sensor, can shoot up to 10 frames per second in stills, or up to 60 frames per second in Full HD if you're shooting video. So pretty standard for a micro four thirds camera, 60 megapixel sensor. Even though, it's not as many megapixels as you might find on some cameras, 16 is still plenty enough for most everyday pictures. Unless you're planning on making some ginormous prints, 16 megapixels is going to be more than enough for your average person. It's way more than enough to post pictures on social media like Instagram, Facebook, and anything like that. So totally fine, even though with a lower megapixel count. I'm not going to go too deep into the specs of this camera just because it has been out for a while and specs just take up so much time to talk about. So instead, let's first talk about who this camera might be for. So this camera, look at it. It is a pretty small camera, even though I do have this little pancake lens on it, so that kind of makes it even smaller. But even if you have a more traditional lens, it's not electronic and doesn't retract like this one, this camera still has this very nice and small form factor, which I think is one of the biggest advantages of this camera. Is because it has that small form factor, I think this camera would be great for either professional photographers who just want like a second camera to carry around with them without bringing their bulky DSLRs or carrying their larger cameras and lenses with them, or just kind of more hobbyist photographers that want a camera that is stylish, pretty easy to use, and pretty small, that they can bring with them on vacation, maybe on some hikes, on family trips, just out to the park or a walk in the city. Just something very lightweight and easy to carry around, but still can deliver better quality images than you would get from like a cell phone or a standard point and shoot. Plus, with this camera, you do get RAW capability, you get all the manual controls that you would see on pretty much any DSLR or mirrorless cameras. So you do get plenty more control versus, like I said, a phone or point and shoot camera. So it's kind of a good in-between body. It's not quite a beginner body, it's a little bit of a step up from that. So it's kind of this middle of the road body from Olympus. So if you're a little bit more familiar with different aspects of photography or video and want to step up to something that's good, however not super bulky or super complicated, this little guy right here works very well for that. And my light died. And continue on to that kind of little smaller form factor. It also might be a nice little starting vlogger camera, mainly because it has pretty decent video autofocus and it does have a flip out screen, which if you're planning on vlogging is really nice. And it also does have a mic jack, so you can plug in an external microphone so you have some nice crisp and clean audio versus just using a built-in microphone that you might get on some other cameras. So built-in mic jack, flippy screen, decent video autofocus. So it's pretty nice if you want to start maybe vlogging or making some quick simple videos and still want a camera that kind of retains that small little form factor so you can easily bring it with you wherever you go. Alright, so that kind of touches a little bit on who I think this camera is for. Obviously anybody can use it, even if you're a super professional or just an amateur. I just think it's a pretty nice overall camera. So now that I've talked about who I think this camera might be for, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I really like about it, starting with the gorgeous looks. I mean, look at it. It's got this nice silver color. It also does come in black, but silver color with this fox leather kind of trim around it. It just looks like an old school film camera, which I really like. Plus, you got these really nice knobs up on the top for both mode selector dials or just, you know, the regular exposure dials, and everything just feels very like solid and crispy and clicky and metal. Like it feels like you're actually holding like a good solid chunk of lightweight metal in your hands. So I love the way it looks. I know looks aren't going to be anything that has to do with like image quality or the performance of the camera, but you know, for those of you that do care about some stylish looks, this guy right here looks pretty nice. Anyways, so moving on from the beauty of this camera, the next thing that I really like about this camera for both stills and video are kind of the colors that come out of it. The colors, they're not super exaggerated or super like extravagant or anything like that. They seem very natural and very organic, but with a little bit of added contrast straight out of the camera. Obviously, if you're shooting raw, you can adjust those colors however you want, but even with minimum adjustments, I think the colors look pretty good for both stills and video, which I always like because it can save a lot of time in post-production if you just need to or want to pump out those pictures or video pretty quickly without having to do a lot of like color grading or color correction or anything like that. The other nice thing about this camera when it comes to stills and video is the fact that it has built-in image stabilization. So the sensor around moves inside to compensate for any kind of like camera shake that you may have. So it's really nice if you're taking stills in like lower light, you can really lower down your shutter speed and still get a pretty sharp image provided your subject's not moving around by just, you know, hand holding the camera without having to rely on a tripod all the time. And for video, it's really nice if you're vlogging, you know, you're gonna get a lot more stable footage than you would otherwise. And if you're not vlogging and you're just shooting random video, it also helps stabilize the shake, the natural shake that you just get from your hands. So it just keeps your footage looking a lot smoother and a lot, you know, better. Obviously, it's not going to be a replacement for like a glide cam or a gimbal. However, it's better than not having any image stabilization at all. Moving on from that, I also really like the controls of this camera. I talked a little bit about when I'm talking about the looks of the camera, but the controls on this camera just feel very nice and solid. And there's plenty of customizable buttons, which I always love on cameras when you can customize buttons because, you know, this button right here, for example, on the top, it's for HDR. But if I don't do a lot of bracket shooting or HDR shooting, I can change it so when I click it, it doesn't go to HDR, it, you know, affects a different setting that, you know, I may select for it. And I absolutely love that. I wish more cameras would throw in like more customizable buttons. I love that about the GH5. I like that about the Sony cameras that I've played around with a little bit. So customizability I think is always good because then you can really tailor the camera to how you want it to be. I also did mention that it did have a flippy screen, which I think is also really nice for those of you who want to vlog or just take selfies because, you know, it just adds a lot of additional functionality to the camera. Also really like the viewfinder on this camera. Even though it's not the highest resolution viewfinder, it does have a very consistent refresh rate. So meaning if you're going from like a light area to a dark area, you're not going to see the viewfinder all of a sudden like slow down to try to still show you the full colored image. It'll just kind of darken itself. So it acts a lot more like a optical viewfinder, which I find just a little bit more natural versus just having a slower shutter speed going through the viewfinder and everything looking blurry. I prefer to have that higher refresh rate, higher response time versus actually seeing the image. And another thing, this camera does have a touch screen. However, it is a little bit limited, but I'll talk about that in a second. But you can use the touchscreen to navigate through pictures, you can zoom in into the pictures, and you can also select your focus points if you're shooting video or if you're shooting stills using the back screen. And even though this camera has a smaller sensor, I was still pretty impressed by the low light capability of it. It's not going to be anything as good as like pretty much any full frame camera. If you're shooting around 1600 to 3200 ISO, you're going to get a fairly clean image with maybe just a little bit of noise. Personally, I found it to be pretty tolerable. Your noise tolerance level may be a little bit different than mine. I personally prefer a little bit of noise versus getting like a blurry image. As long as the image is sharp, I don't mind if it's a little bit noisy. So for me, it worked pretty well. So those are the things that I liked about the camera. Now let's talk a little bit about the things that I think they could improve on. So hopefully they do with the next model. So the first things first is the menu navigation. I find the menus in this camera to be a little bit of confusing, and it's mainly because like if you're in a certain like camera setting or if you have a certain mode enabled or a certain setting enabled, it kind of grays out other settings. And you know, you're scrolling through the menu, you're trying to find or change a setting and it might be grayed out, so you're trying to like figure out what setting is affecting it. Why is it grayed out? I wish it would give you some kind of hint. Maybe it's like, oh hey, I can't select this setting because this setting is on, or something like that. It's a little bit frustrating if you're trying to change things quickly and then trying to figure out what you're actually trying to do. Especially since if you don't use this camera a whole lot, it can get a little bit confusing and frustrating trying to figure out what setting affects what. And another thing about navigating the menus, or just the menus in general, even though the camera does have touchscreen support, you can't use it to navigate through the menus, and it's just so, it's annoying. It's kind of annoying. You just like, see it, oh, maybe I can just click it. Nope, you gotta use the scroll, you gotta use the little directional pad to scroll through the menus. I don't know why camera manufacturers don't just let you go through the menu using the touchscreen, even though, you know, it's already built in. You might as well just add that capability. The GH5 does it, a lot of the new Nikon and Canons do it, and the only other camera that I've really seen that doesn't let you navigate the menu, I'm pretty sure it's the Sony's. I'm not sure about Fuji, I don't know if they do it or not, so I can't really tell you about that. But Sony and Olympus don't let you navigate the menus using just a touchscreen. At least in Olympus's case, not on this camera, so maybe their newer ones might do it. I haven't looked into it, but it's just a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. And one last thing that I'm really not too fond of, and this is getting to some like really nitpicky territory, if you are shooting video. So the microphone jack is right up here on the top, and if you have a microphone plugged into it and you flip the screen around, it kind of gets in the way. The cable just sticks out right here, right in front of the screen, so it kind of limits what you can see if you're shooting a vlog or taking a selfie or, you know, filming yourself. It's a very small issue, but it does get in the way. So hopefully in the next model, you know, they kind of bump that up a little bit, and or just do something to it so it doesn't get in the way as much. And that's pretty much it. There aren't many things to not like about this camera. It's a great little camera that can be used pretty much in a lot of different situations. And one thing I did forget to mention is that Olympus has an amazing lens selection, ranging from anything like pretty wide angles to anything that's telephoto. Plus you can also use other micro four thirds lenses, such as the ones from Panasonic or some other companies that do make micro four thirds lenses. So, you know, you have a pretty wide selection of glass that you can use, which is really nice because you can get something that's, you know, pretty basic, that's little, like this little pancake lens, to something a little bit more advanced and professional. So it's really nice to have that large lens selection on the camera. And that's pretty much it. So we're coming up to the end of the review, and just to do a little recap, I think this camera is perfect for somebody that wants to have a pretty small body to carry around with them to take on vacations, some family trips, you know, out in town, out in the city. It's something that they can easily slip into their pocket and just carry around with them, but have more control than you get from point and shoot or a cell phone, have the raw capability, and have the ability to change out your lenses. This little guy fits that little niche perfectly, and I think that if that's kind of a camera that you're looking for, you should definitely give this one a try. So that concludes my little review of the Olympus OMD E-M5 Mark II. Yes, that is a mouthful. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends that are also into photography, into video, that may be looking for a new camera, and, you know, let them know. Be like, hey, check out this camera right here. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.